Socrates said an unexamined life is not worth living, which would imply an examined life is worth living. C.S. Lewis said good philosophy must exist if for no other reason because bad philosophy needs to be answered. We live in a world full of bad ideas, and ideas have consequences. Available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify and YouTube. If you have not already, like, subscribe and share this podcast with family and friends, a show where we examine life contained with philosophies, ideas and their consequences on today's culture. I am Rainer Thermal and this is Hey Culture. Hello everyone and welcome back to Hey Culture. Finally we have an episode again after a while of a bit of silence. Sorry on my part, it was a lack of planning and also life being busy. But I'm really excited for today's episode. With us on today's episode is Dr. Carey Walton. I got to meet Dr. Carey when she did a conference last year at Russia Christi, and also she was at a conference of Apologetics SA this year. Dr. Carey, welcome.
Hello, nice to be here.
Yeah, really excited to have you on. So before we dive into today's topic, Dr. Carey, tell us a bit more about who you are.
I live in the United States. I live in Pennsylvania in a little town called Lidditz, which is a historic town. It's very quaint and looks like a Christmas card of an old-fashioned American town. It's a very sweet place to live. And I would call myself a biblical apologist. I imagine your listeners are familiar with what apologetics is. It's that branch of philosophy, that branch of theology that seeks to make a rational, sound, logical defense for the Christian faith. So apologists help people wrestle with questions of faith, particularly intellectual questions, things that are bothering them, things that they don't understand, or that might present roadblocks to their faith. So apologists help them understand why Christianity is sound and historic and evidential, why it matches the evidence we see around us and how it meets the longings of the human heart. That's what apologists do. I have a master's degree from a school in North Carolina. Now it just moved, called Southern Evangelical Seminary, and I studied apologetics there. And then a few years ago, I decided to go back and get a PhD, and my PhD is in philosophy of religion. So that's the idea of looking at religious questions of faith, but from a philosophical standpoint. Rather than just going to the Bible and saying the Bible says this and this, we're saying how can we look at this question from a rational standpoint that deals with logic and epistemology and the disciplines we find in philosophy. So I did that and finished a few years ago, 2 years ago this May, and I'm just enjoying sharing what I've learned about how sound the Christian faith is. And when people have questions, it's a real joy to share what I've learned, because the more we learn, I think, about the Christian faith, the more confidence we can have in it. And it really strengthens people's faith who are Christians. And I think it encourages people who are seeking that it's worth their time to investigate Christianity.
Wow, that is amazing. You said you called yourself specifically a biblical apologist. Mm-hmm. Maybe just for reviewers, why, or what do you mean by that specification?
Well, in Acts, we read about Paul going to different cities, and he'd go there, he'd go to the synagogue. First thing he'd do is meet with people there, and the scripture says he gave an apology. He made a defense for the Christian faith. In fact, that's the word in Greek. It's called apologia, and that's where we get that word. It's meaning to make a defense or an explanation, not a defense like a nasty argument, but more like an explanatory argument. He would try to encourage people to understand why Jesus fulfilled biblical prophecies, for example, why he fit the template of the Messiah, how he demonstrated his authority and his divine identity by the miracles that he did, particularly rising from the dead. Paul talked about the resurrection a lot. So that's what Paul did, and that's what Christians are called to do. We're called to speak to people about why we believe what we believe and how it makes sense. And when they say, yeah, but what about this? Or what about that? How come this happens? Why does God allow suffering? Or how come these other religions say they're true or whatever? And they present these obstacles. We're supposed to be able to give an answer back. And that's another good definition for apologetics, is giving an answer back. When somebody has a question or they have an objection or they just have a doubt, we're supposed to be able to give an answer back to encourage them to trust in the Bible and trust in the one true God. So that's what apologetics is. And I just love it. I think it's exciting, and it's amazing to see there's a real resurgence of interest in apologetics. And it's wonderful to see what God is doing with that discipline these days.
Yeah, I'm also excited about it, really am. And I think I'm seeing it even in South Africa. I remember at one stage I worked at a church and people were skeptical about apologetics a lot. But I see it now getting to a place where I hear people speaking about it, even without them knowing that I actually work at Apologetics SA. And being in that circles, I can hear people using the term, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. In 2021, that wasn't the case. Now it's picking up. I'm really excited about that. So, and something that's been pressed on my heart, but I do see it now, is that people not just only focus on giving a defense like Peter said in 1 Peter 3:15, but also in the way we do it with gentleness and respect. And I see a rise in that as well.
Yeah, that's important. That's very important. And I think sometimes people are afraid of apologetics or apologists because they think, oh, this is hyper intellectual. This is, somebody's going to try to pick a fight with me or whatever. And that's if that's the problem, then we're doing it wrong. We're supposed to be gentle and kind and sensitive to where the other person's coming from and ask a lot of questions and see what it is they need to hear about, what they need to talk about.
Yeah, that is true. So you are a biblical apologist. What ministry are you currently involved in? What do you keep yourself busy with now that you got your PhD?
That's a good question. Well, I'm currently looking for a job. I'm hoping to find a job teaching. So I'm looking for that now. But what I do like to do is I like to teach wherever I get a chance, teach at churches. I like to teach youth, like high school, college age youth. And I just enjoy interacting with them and hearing their questions. And I speak at conferences wherever I can. And I have had a few conferences. I've run a few conferences. I haven't done one for a while, but I have run conferences that are apologetics geared towards high school and college age young people, where we bring in speakers and we just address some of the basic questions about God and the Bible and things that most people will hear in their lifetime. They'll hear questions because there's a handful of questions. If you're a Christian, there's a handful of questions you can bet you'll hear eventually. How do we know God exists? What about the Bible? Aren't there problems in the Bible? What about evolution? What about evil and suffering? Those kinds of things. And so my conference has kind of dealt with like those big topics that teenagers or young people are bound to hear as they interact with their friends, their coworkers, that kind of thing. So I go kind of wherever I'm needed, but I really do enjoy speaking. So whenever I get a chance to speak, I make time for that.
That is amazing. And without further ado, I would like to get into today's topic. So we're going to speak about the objectivity of beauty, and it's actually quite fitting that it happens this week. On Tuesday, I had to fill in for another lecturer, a colleague of mine, because he was double booked for the full-time and the part-time teaching. So I had filled in with the part-time, using his material. And what he actually prepared for them was Roger Scruton's Why Beauty Matters, that documentary.
Oh, yes.
So I watched it now, I think, for the third time. When I taught the class, I watched it with the class now. And that just stirred something again in me with regards to how important beauty is. So to kick it off, Dr. Carey, what do you mean with objective beauty?
What do I mean by objective beauty? Well, I think when you ask people what beauty is, you're bound to get a number of different answers, but often it will have some kind of an undertone that beauty is basically a subjective experience. It's what the person feels when they see or hear something that appeals to them. It is their taste, or it excites them. They have a positive reaction, and it's really just about them and whatever particular preference that they happen to have. And there's that old expression that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So in other words, the emphasis so often when people are trying to understand what beauty is, the emphasis so often is on them, the subject. What is the subject of the interaction, feeling or thinking, and the judgment that they're making? So they think of beauty as a subjective matter. And I think there's certainly a subjective aspect of it. People do have personal preferences and things, but there are aspects of beauty that cut across most people's preferences, most cultural preferences, and most preferences that we see throughout time. There are things that just are traits that most people throughout time have considered beautiful. So there's a hint there that it's not so much about the subject, the person having the experience, but that there's something going on with the beautiful thing that is drawing us to it. So the idea about beauty having an objective nature really is focusing the attention more on the object, the thing itself. What is it about the thing itself that is pleasing or captivating, or that's pulling us toward it, or that's evoking the positive reaction? And I think of like in different cultures, people might stress certain facial features. Like some cultures would prefer, high cheekbones, or they prefer wider lips or thinner lips, or wider nose or whatever. And that seems very reasonable because there are trends within cultures that stress these things. But there are always things within every culture's concept of beauty that basically stay the same. And again, that's a clue that there are real things, there are real attributes that human beings associate with beauty and that we're drawn to. And I think of Thomas Aquinas. He considered the objective nature of beauty. In other words, the idea that beauty has an identity, has a reality of its own, and we connect with it, but we don't create it. And he said that when we see beautiful things, when we hear beautiful things, we encounter beauty, usually there are several things that are going on. The first thing he said is that what we perceive as being beautiful has a wholeness to it. In other words, what is supposed to be there according to the kind of thing that it is, well, that is there. There's nothing lacking in that thing that should be there. And my favorite example is a tree. And when I talk about this, I have a photograph of a tree in my slides, but I see this all the time in Pennsylvania. In fact, on my street, they're always doing this. We'll have a beautiful tree that's growing up in front of somebody's house, and it's big and it's full, and it's got all the branches that are coming out and they're full of leaves. And then the power company comes along and says, these leaves are in the way of the power cords, and we're going to have to chop a big chunk of this tree out. So they get the saws and the guy up there on the platform, and he cuts a quarter of the tree away so that nothing's touching the electrical lines. And you look at this tree and there's this big chunk out of it, and you think, oh, that was such a beautiful tree. Why did they have to do that? And that's just a really good example. When there's something that's supposed to be there and it's not there, we tend to see those things as less beautiful. So that's one part of it. Another thing that he said is that beautiful things have a kind of harmony to the parts. There are parts working together the way they ought to. There's a balance to the parts. The parts have the right style. They're not in conflict. There's like a composition that ought to be there, and every piece that should be there is there, so that they're all working together. And this is kind of hard to explain, but it's one of those things, when you see it, you know it. And when it's not there, it's obvious. Even if you can't explain it, when it's not there, it's obvious. Like if you have maybe like a guest bedroom that has, you just redecorated, maybe your teenage child is off to college and moved out, and you took his or her room and you made a guest room out of it and redid the whole thing, and you changed the linens and you put matching pillows there and painted the walls and everything, that the furniture matches and the colors match and it's balanced and harmonious. It's just aesthetically pleasing, and you're drawn to that kind of room. That's the kind of room, if you were a guest at the house, you'd want to sleep in that room. Whereas if it was maybe left the way your teenage child when they moved out, you think of like posters on the walls and stuff, mismatched things, and the colors don't go, and maybe it's cluttered, maybe it's untidy. The parts are not working together. There's not that sense of harmony in the composition. So we almost always see that as less attractive. We don't see that kind of a composition as beautiful. So there's the wholeness of the thing, or all the parts there. There's the composition, or all the parts working together the way they should. And then the third thing that he talked about is this idea of radiance. And this is kind of hard to explain, but again, we know it when we see it. When a beautiful thing presents itself to us and it's really beautiful, it tends to have a kind of radiance to it. In other words, it grabs our attention, and it makes us want to see it or hear it again and again. Like you might go to a waterfall, and Niagara Falls in this country, or Victoria Falls in Africa or something, and just the astounding brilliant beauty of that thing just grabs you, it captivates you. And Aquinas calls that radiance. Another word he uses is effulgence. Does it have an effulgence to it? It's the kind of thing that you just want to see again and again. And maybe if it's music that you want to hear again and again. And beautiful things are like that. We just can't get enough of them. So those are some markers. When these things are all present in a thing, we tend to say, that's a beautiful thing. So there's a way to kind of evaluate beauty. It's got markers to it. When we see or hear, experience things that have these kinds of perfections, we tend to agree generally that those are beautiful things.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Is there then also some universal aspect to it, meaning that there are certain aspects, like you said, that it's kind of worldwide or universal in a sense that everybody would find this beautiful type thing?
Yeah, for the most part.
Yeah.
And like I say, there are cultural things that come into play. But
preferences.
Everybody, throughout history has found like a symmetrical human face to be beautiful. There's never been a time where somebody with an eye missing was considered like that's the ideal beauty standard. Like we've never thought of things that way. There are things that just kind of are universal traits of beauty that historically have just always drawn people towards them.
If I'm not mistaken, your thesis was based on the idea of objective beauty. Your PhD, did you do your dissertation on this topic?
Well, I did my dissertation on the broader topic of the argument from desire.
Okay.
The idea that God is uses our natural desires, our desires for the good, the true, and the beautiful. He uses those. He stirs those up in us to draw us to himself. So beauty is a big part of that equation. So I had a particular interest in studying beauty.
Okay, so the next topic we're going to do when we record our next episode is going to be on what you did your dissertation.
Oh, good, very good.
If I remember correctly, I think it's the argument from desire is similar to Lewis' argument from joy, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Okay, I'm looking forward to that episode as well. But to get back to beauty itself, I remember from the Apologetics SA conference, you said that you can make an argument, or you made an argument for God from the idea of objective beauty as an argument for God, if I'm not mistaken, or am I mistaken?
Well, I think it points us that way.
Yeah.
I think it really does, because it's one of those things that is mysterious. Why do human beings love beauty? And we do. We all love it. We more than love it. We need it. We need beauty in our lives to be healthy and well-adjusted and to flourish as human beings. It brings us joy. It brings us hope. It's healing. It's consoling. There's so much in it that is mysterious but unmistakably good. And I think when people think about how they react to beauty, they can't help but feel that there's something spiritual going on, even if they might say, well, I'm a card carrying atheist. There is no God, there's no spiritual life. Our reaction to beauty sure feels spiritual. It really does. And even really trenchant atheists, people like Richard Dawkins, people like Carl Sagan or Christopher Hitchens, have talked about how powerful beauty has been in their lives. And Richard Dawkins even talked about how the beauty of nature had made him want to worship something. And he said, I can't help but think there's an agent behind this. I feel drawn to it. I feel stirred by it in my innermost person, and it makes me want to worship. And I think this kind of annoyed him because his worldview said no worshiping, not allowed. So he was very quick to say, now we know there's nobody to worship. There is no God, so we can just dismiss that. But in very honest moments, he talked about how beauty made him want to find somebody to thank for it. And so it's very powerful, even to people who have their feet like really dug in and say there is no God. It has a very quiet, strong pull on people to move them to the possibility that it's not purely subjective, that there is some kind of a cause for it, and there is some kind of a personal agent who's responsible for it. Because it feels like such a gift, doesn't it? When you see or feel something that's very beautiful, it's a huge blessing, and you can't help but think, somebody has just given me something wonderful.
That what Dawkins does is actually so sad, to think that you get this desire to feel like, okay, I have to be thankful, worship something, but to come to the conclusion to just dismiss that. I mean, we do an outreach at a coastal town in South Africa's West Coast each December. And there's this part in this town where, I don't know what you call it in English, but it makes like a small bay that goes into where there's a lot of rock faces and big cliffs. And it's not really a beach part, but it's cliffs that you look down at the sea. And the sea's really rough there as well, like big waves, really, really rough. But as it's the West Coast, when the sun sets, it sets over the sea on that side behind this rough water, and it's the most beautiful picture that you can imagine, and the sense of awe that you get when you stand there. You feel this mist hitting you every time the waves break, and you get this sense of awe of how small you are and how thankful you are, and there's something greater than yourself outside of you. And it's a sad, almost empty thought for me that you can get to a place where you just say, but we have to dismiss that.
And I think it's very interesting how people who cling to a godless worldview have to really work at that. They have to work at rejecting the idea that there's no cause for the beauty, there's no meaning behind the beauty. Because I think if left on our own, it will carry us to the idea that there's something that has caused this, that is enjoying the gift of giving beauty to mankind, and enjoys the fact that we are pleased with it and edified by it. There's something absolutely positive going on by the thing existing, and then us appreciating it. And I'm just surprised sometimes how atheists have to really strain to say, I'm not going to that conclusion. I will not go there. I think it's really interesting. You had mentioned the PBS special by Roger Scruton on beauty. Yeah.
Why Beauty Matters.
Yes, Why Beauty Matters. That's very good. It's not very long. If your viewers haven't seen it, go YouTube that, find it.
I don't know if it's on YouTube anymore, but I know it's on Vimeo.
Oh, is it? Okay.
And yes, it came out in 2009. It's on Vimeo. And what I'll do is I have the link. I'll put it in the description box.
Oh, that's excellent.
I'll put it in the description box of this video. And I think it's about 55 minutes long.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's a very manageable time that you can do, in just one sitting. But I was reading about Roger Scruton the other day, just for fun, just to see what his background was. And he was a professing atheist for most of his life, for most of his career as a philosopher. But in his latter days, he connected himself with an Anglican church and got very involved and started playing the organ there, the piano, I'm not sure which, maybe both, and professed some kind of faith in the triune God, some kind of personal faith. But I mean, it's very nebulous. We're not sure exactly what the story is, but according to him, he embraced Christianity towards the end of his life. And I can't help but wonder if his devotion to beauty and understanding it and taking it seriously for the power that it had in his life was part of what moved him to that place.
Yeah. Well, having watched the documentary in this week, I can see that could have played an important role. I think the concept of beauty is a dangerous place for atheists to dabble in if they want to stay atheists. Especially, I mean, if you, especially natural beauty, like landscapes and the heavens and so forth, and also what humans are capable of producing ourselves, which it does create a sense of awe. But something else that stood out to me, and I think I remember last year at Roger Christie's conference, somebody asked you this question, but he also showed in the documentary how in our modern society we've kind of turned our backs against beauty. Not only it's really easy to see it within modern art, or in postmodern art, but also in our architecture and how we approach certain things. It's people go for what is efficient, but it's not something that in its efficiency that you actually see that it's beautiful. We kind of get these ugly structures around us in cities. And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's a tragedy. That really bothers me. That bothers me a lot. And yes, there's a sense that it doesn't really matter so much if we build beautiful things, if we have beautiful architecture, if we surround ourselves with color and light and texture and balance and composition, all that, so long as it's functional and so long as it's cost efficient. And so there's a tremendous trade-off there where, you know, a generation or two, a couple generations ago, people were very willing to spend some extra money to add details to their buildings, to add craftsmanship, to add brickwork that was interesting, to make sure that their architecture fit in with the feeling in the town that they were building in. You know, there was some real care done to it because people, I think, understood what an uplifting influence beauty had to the people living there. And now there seems to be very little appreciation for that. And I think, you know, I'm just deeply disturbed at how ugly our cities look. You know, even if they're wealthy, you know, just our strip malls with, you know, ugly convenience stores and just boring architecture. But even worse than that, I don't know how much of a problem you have, but cities in America have a terrible problem with trash and with graffiti and with they're just derelict. So many cities have at least portions of their communities that are just plain ugly. There's just nothing beautiful there. People don't take care of their properties, or there's enough people there that don't, that the environments are they're just depressing. And I think how awful that is for children growing up in those communities where they're surrounded by graffiti and trash and ugliness. That's bad for their development, and it's bad for their spiritual development. It's bad for their sense of hope. And that always makes me very angry when cities don't prioritize fixing things that are broken and getting rid of graffiti and cleaning up when they think, oh, those are minor problems. They're not minor problems. They affect the quality of life for everyone who's there. So that really does bother me a lot.
I think it has a major effect. A friend of mine, when he did his, so in South Africa, we have a 3-year bachelor's degree, and then you do your honors degree. And then when you've done your honors degree, that would be the equivalent of doing a 4-year bachelor's degree in I think, in the States. But when he did his honors degree, he had to do like a research thesis. And he compared students here in Pretoria studying a specific course, and then he went to Stellenbosch, and you were in Stellenbosch now this time when you were in South Africa, so you know what Stellenbosch looks like. It's
amazing.
So he went to look at students studying basically the same course at the University of Stellenbosch, and he said in exam time, the people in Pretoria had a lot more stress levels being high, people being stressed out, being unhappy. But he says in Stellenbosch, even in that high stress environment of it's now it's test week, it's exam week, they would still say, let's go for wine tasting, or let's go hike this hill here. Or there was just a completely different way of life, and I almost want to say mental health, just being in the city where it's not as pretty, but in the countryside in Stellenbosch, where, as you would know, it's amazingly beautiful there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it does have a big impact on people growing up like that.
Oh, it absolutely does. I have a friend who's struggling with a chronic illness, and it's really got her down. She's had just a lot of pain because of this illness. And I was talking to her on the phone a couple months ago, and she said, I went to the doctor today, and he said, you need to go outside in nature every day. That was part of his prescription to her. Here's some medicine, and you were supposed to go outside into nature every single day. And I thought, what good advice that is. Because there's something, nature is unusually beautiful. It's beautiful in a way that artistry isn't. A painting or something can be beautiful, but nature has its own way of being beautiful because it's got a sense of being what it ought to be. It's kind of untinkered with, it's unfooled around with. It's got the components that it has. Maybe there's some tinkering with it in gardens and that kind of thing, but we still get that sense when we're out in nature that this is the way it's supposed to be. That's what we mean when we say something is natural. It's supposed to be that way. And whether we recognize it or not, there's goodness there. There's what we call, metaphysical goodness. When something is the way it ought to be, according to the kind of thing that it is, we call that good. Mm-hmm. And when we go out in nature, or if we just see something that's beautiful, maybe we go to an art gallery, for example, spend our lunch hour there or something, we're taking that goodness into ourselves in a real way. We're taking it in through our eyes, we're taking it in through our ears. If we go to a symphony, we're listening to that. We're actually making that a part of us. So of course we're going to feel better because we are better in a very real way. And I think that's something that's very interesting when you think about what beauty is. It's a natural pointer to the existence of God. Aquinas, when he was asked what's the definition for beauty in the Summa, he said, beauty is goodness perceived by the senses.
Wow.
That's a really great little working definition. Beauty is goodness perceived by the senses. We take it in through our senses and it becomes part of us. Beauty is that aspect of being that when we take it into our senses, it brings us pleasure, it brings us joy. And when we think about where beauty comes from, everything, of course, comes from God, but beauty comes from God in a way that we get a sense of his goodness and his beauty through the things that he's created, through natural things, through trees and sky and hiking and the planets and the solar system and all of that. There's beauty there. There's goodness, and we can detect it, and we can follow it back to its source, which of course is God, who is goodness himself, and he's the most beautiful thing. He's the thing that will please us the very most, the more we understand him.
That's beautiful. That actually ties in to something else I wanted to ask from what Roger Scruton said, is how he made this point that the purpose beauty serves, and if you take Aquinas' definition, it makes what Scruton said even more powerful, in the sense that beauty kind of makes life, with all our death and suffering and everything, worth it, and kind of not just alleviates it, but kind of makes it bearable and worth it. Mm-hmm. And adds, even if you are, it's amazing that the doctor gave it that prescription to go outside, because it brings, I think, a certain joy to one's life.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and I did notice that about Scruton's commentary, and I was struck when he was talking about that. There was this photograph of, I think it was the Pieta, I'm not sure, but I think it was Michelangelo's sculpture of Mary holding the dead Jesus, and how we look at that, and it's so profound and so moving, and it's so sad, but yet it's so beautiful. And it helps us understand how good can come out of suffering and evil, how there can be beauty in, obviously the sacrifice of Jesus for us was the most beautiful act ever done by a human being. But we look at that and we're moved by it, but it's not pretty. It's a tragic scene, but yet it's very beautiful. So it helps make sense of the pain of this very difficult life that we have to live. And it can be a real consolation.
Yeah, it's amazing. Wow. I didn't expect beforehand that it would get almost feeling like a devotional type session. What it's amazing, and I hope it blesses the audience as well. One of my other pet peeves when it comes to this whole concept of beauty and architecture is where we as Protestant Christians, and I know how it is in the US, but I know in South Africa, we kind of moved away from building beautiful churches
Yeah.
to a place where churches look like warehouses. Um, and I hear the argument of not like being wary of materialism, and it's not about the place, it's about the spirit of it, and the church is where the people gather together, and I hear that, but I also think that there's something to as a worship towards God as well, building a place like that. If you look at the Catholic cathedrals and so, there's something amazing as to what they have accomplished.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I understand the motivation not to waste a lot of money on ornamentation, and some denominations, they have that as part of their viewpoint, that we don't accessorize our worship space. They have various reasons for it, and I understand that. But I miss the formal architecture. I miss the care when you go to an old church. And this is why people want to get married in old churches. If you have a beautiful old church with stained glass windows, there people always calling, can we have our wedding there? Can we have our wedding? Because this is where people want their photographs taken. This is where everything is just so special, and has this sense built into it that this is a sacred space. And I think when they built these cathedrals in the past that were, soaring, they're very high, they had these big high ceilings and this very elaborate stonework and these gorgeous stained glass windows. The light would come through those windows and would put the colors on the ground, and you would walk through this fantastic space that almost felt it felt like otherworldly, almost, in a word. It puts you in a frame of mind to worship. I think you get the sense that this is a place that is dedicated to the Most High God, and He deserves the effort that was put into it to set this place apart. This is not just any old building. This is someplace where we've brought our best efforts, our best craftsmanship, our best artistry, and made this space that's different from other spaces. And very often people who are not religious, who don't have any kind of personal faith, will still go to a space like that, a beautiful old cathedral, and they will want to worship because the space feels like that's what it's for. It kind of draws you to a contemplation of transcendence all by itself, just by the architecture.
Yeah, and it definitely does. And surely there has to be, and I understand the whole budget thing, because I think the way it's been done in the past, having people kind of, the way they had people trying to build some of the things in the past weren't necessarily as beautiful the way they went about funding it a lot of times in history. But so with that, I think yes, I think there's a good thing about stewardship in modern churches today, but surely there has to be ways still on a budget to still make the place beautiful. It doesn't have to be as elaborate, but still doesn't have to look like a factory warehouse.
No, I really agree with you on this too. I have a friend who pastors a church here in Lidditz, where I live, and it's a relatively new building, and it's not particularly exciting architecturally. It's kind of bland, actually. But something that they did was they had original artworks done. There's a parishioner there who's a very, very good artist, and this person has made these paintings for the church, and they're absolutely gorgeous. And there are various things like one of them is Mary, a very pregnant Mary contemplating the birth of her child, and another one might be the story of the prodigal son or whatever. There's these great paintings that this person did, and they're framed and they're around the church in various places. A set of these things, and you just look at them and think, now this is not run of the mill art that you bought online. This is genuine, beautiful creativity that somebody worked at. And just that simple bit of ornamentation sort of transformed this very simple utilitarian space into something much more beautiful. So I think you're right. You can do that. You can work with what you have. You don't have to start from scratch and build some very elaborate, expensive building. But you can set it apart with beautiful things. Even making sure there's flowers. I love to see flowers at church, flowers outside and flowers in the building, flowers on the altar. It makes a difference.
It does. No, it definitely does. Well, I think we've answered the question whether beauty matters or not. I think it definitely does matter. And for the viewers, if you look at that documentary by Roger Scruton, I think you get the same conclusion, to see if we don't go towards art having beauty or even music having melody, it becomes lifeless. It becomes obscure and perverse. You started out saying that people a lot of times say that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and you went on to say that people do have their different preferences, but is it fair to kind of give an absolute answer to say no, it's not in the eye of the beholder, or is it yes but, or no but?
Well, I think certainly there's a subjective aspect to it. Of course, as subjects, we're taking the beauty in and we're reacting to it. So it does interact with us in a very personal way. And I think that beauty is one of these things that's called a transcendental. There are certain aspects of being that talk about how being is understood in different ways. For example, the very act of existence, the very reality of being can be understood as good. The fact that something exists, that it has actuality, is a metaphysical good. So, philosophers say that good is another way of understanding being, or that truth is another way of understanding being. Truth is being understood through the intellect, but beauty is a kind of a subset of good, because beauty is that which pleases when seen or heard or apprehended. So it's good when it's perceived by the senses, and because everything that exists has being, because it exists, it has a certain goodness to it. The fact that it exists means, God made it. There's goodness to it in a metaphysical sense. So you can rightly say that everything that exists has a kind of beauty to it. And there's different degrees. And I mentioned the idea that the things that we consider the most beautiful tend to have these features like wholeness and like radiance and composition. But everything, if you look closely enough at it, has a kind of beauty to it. I even think about something you wouldn't think of as being beautiful. Like maybe I would get like a cut on my finger, and I wouldn't think of that as being particularly beautiful. But if I thought about it, the idea that I can get a cut on my finger and then it bleeds, and the amazing way that the body cleans itself when there's an injury with the blood, and then the blood clots, and then the immune system kicks in and starts creating cells to put that wound back together again and heal. I mean, it's really amazing when you think about it. If you look closely at anything, you can find beauty there. So I think it's correct to say that people they can genuinely see beauty in things that other people might miss, or they might resonate with something and see it as beautiful, and somebody else would say, oh, that does nothing for me. So in that regard, there's definitely a subjective aspect to it. And I think sometimes too, we don't understand things very well. If we had some understanding about what we were experiencing, we might appreciate it more, and we might see the beauty that's there. Part of the reason we don't see the beauty or perceive it as beautiful is because we just don't understand it. I remember when I was talking to my sister years ago, I said I was writing this paper on the argument from desire, and it had this chapter on beauty, and she said, I don't understand, how beauty could be this objective thing and how it could be universal. She said, like, for example, Chinese opera. I hate Chinese opera. She's saying, it's my sister saying that. She said, Chinese operas is so strange. It's just, I've heard it described as two cats fighting. It's like this very kind of peculiar, almost got like screechy quality to it. It's very unusual. It's not what Westerners necessarily think of as melodic, beautiful music. And my sister said, like, Chinese opera, how is that beautiful? And that's not my thing. I don't really like Chinese opera, but the truth is I don't know anything about Chinese opera. And if I sat down with somebody who was a musician who played that music, or who was a singer who actually performed that music, and they explained to me how it's put together and why the music is structured that way and why the singing is the way it is, I bet I would appreciate it more, and I would see the beauty in it, because a Chinese culture will say, this is beautiful, we love this in our culture, and we create this, and it's a joy to listen to. And I think when sometimes you get an education in things, you'll see that there's beauty there that it maybe your culture just doesn't understand. So I see the subjective nature of beauty showing up that way. Yeah, but I do definitely think there's a tendency, I guess I'm reacting, and it's important to underline the idea that our culture's concept that beauty is whatever you want it to be. I think that's misguided. I think that's wrong, and actually kind of a harmful thing. Like any ugly thing that you put together and say, this is art, any shocking thing that you paint or any sculpture that's just disturbing, you put it in a gallery and you say, this is art, and because it's art, it's beautiful. I think that's very misguided. I think that's an upside down thing. So people kind of want that power, like they want the power to decide good from evil. We want the power to decide what's beautiful on our own terms. And I think that sometimes that's an effort to kind of cut God out of the equation as the author of good, as the embodiment of good, and the author and the embodiment of beauty. We want to be the arbiters of all of that. So I think we need to kind of be careful with that.
No, we definitely do. And it is harmful. It is definitely harmful. And it kind of changed. I think if I remember correctly, according to that documentary by Scruton, it was a French artist who first put up a urinal and signed it Art, and I think that kind of kickstarted this movement, but it kind of got to a place of actually deliberately trying to provoke people. And I don't mean provoke you in a deep sense of thinking about life and so forth, but really just to kind of disgust and provoke people to rebel against things. And art became a I almost want to say political tool rather than a celebration of life.
Yeah, I think you're right. You go to a contemporary art gallery and there's many beautiful things there, but sometimes you look at things, you think, what were they thinking? This is kind of repulsive. And the wonderful thing about beauty is beauty elevates us, beauty edifies us. It makes us, or it should make us better people. It should make us want more goodness in our lives. It should make us want to create beauty and share it with other people. It should make us think more carefully about foundational questions, these really important questions like, who am I? Why am I here? What's the basis of morality? Why is something right or wrong? Is there a God? Beauty can really help us along that path to dealing with those kinds of foundational questions. In fact, that's something that Plato talked about, that we start with one beautiful thing. We can appreciate a beautiful thing, like one beautiful person, and that's great. We can say, oh, that's a very beautiful little girl over there. She's so pretty. But then we start thinking, if we're a thoughtful person, the next thing is to think about, well, what about people in general? Why are they beautiful? What makes people in general beautiful? What makes anything beautiful? Why is it a thought beautiful? Why is it beautiful to be virtuous as opposed to being cruel or dishonest or whatever? Why is that beautiful? And then what is beauty itself? Where does that come from? And how is it related to what's good? And he said this pathway, he called it like a ladder. We can start up this ladder, and our thoughts, if we're honest and careful and persistent, it can be like a ladder that leads us to ultimate truth, which he thought was basically God, but he called it, the good. But Christians have a much clearer idea of a personal creator God. And so I do think that beauty can be what Eleanor Stump called a road to God. I know Eleanor Stump is a philosopher. She's brilliant. She has a great little article. You can find it online called Beauty as a Road to God. And she talks about this idea of music. For her, music is one of these things that has been very influential in her life, and the beauty of music. She sees that being very powerful in moving people along in their spiritual journey.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to what you said about if we understand things. I also, in my personal life, I saw that I think that sometimes you can find something beautiful, and if you have a better understanding, it becomes even more beautiful. If I think, for example, I went through a phase where I love music a lot. I love music really, and I can listen to big variety of different genres. But I started listening to Pavarotti, and Nessun Dorma really stood out to me as a really beautiful song. But then I went, but obviously I didn't understand the Italian lyrics, and I went to go read as to what the English version is, as to what the story he is telling. And then understanding the story of what the song is telling, the song became 10, 15 times more beautiful. So yeah, it's amazing what it does. But before I see we're getting close to the hour mark, I want to put you on a spot and ask you, as you've been to South Africa and a majority of our audience is South African, maybe name the 2 or 3 top things that were beautiful for you in our country when you were here.
Oh. Well, one thing I noticed right away is that the clouds in your country are astounding. I was so blown away by how beautiful your sky is. And maybe I just hit you on some good days. I don't know, but I thought I took so many photographs of clouds in South Africa. Oh, wow. They just were so big and bright, and I just thought they were amazing. So the sky I thought was amazing. And I loved the shore at Cape Town. Spent a couple days there, 2 days at Cape Town, and just how absolutely glorious the shore is, and the rocks along the shore, and the sun coming in, and then the sun going down, and all of that is amazing. And then with Table Mountain in the background, That's just one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. So that was pretty moving. We took one of those tram rides up Table Mountain, and I have all this video of me just kind of panning across as we're looking down. It just took my breath away. That was amazing. Let me try to think if there was something else. Oh, the animals, of course. That hardly.
Oh, you guys went to the Lion Park.
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
We went to the lions and cheetahs. Yes. Yeah. So, we don't have any of those animals, except we have a few in zoos, but none of those things are native here. So, your wild animals in South Africa are just amazing. And you don't see those things except in pictures over here, or unless you go to a zoo. But when you actually are right next to a lion and they're coming right up to the vehicle that you're sitting in, and you're like 2 feet from this lion. They're enormous, particularly male lions, and they're so beautiful. They're just so
they're majestic.
They're majestic. That's a great word. Yeah, there's a point sometimes where things are sublime and you run out of words.
That's
but
true.
the lions hit me that way.
Yeah, that's something else. Even like I've saw them a couple of times. Every time it hits you. But when you were on Table Mountain, was it a clear day, or was it like full of like just fog?
It was not as clear as I would like. We didn't have the longest view, but we could see down pretty well. It wasn't foggy, but I wish it had been a little bit more clear. But it wasn't bad. We got to see an awful lot, and it was pretty amazing. So I recommend, if anybody, I told my sister, you really need to go to South Africa if you're looking to take a big holiday. You want to splurge, definitely go. You won't regret it, and it's beautiful. The people are so kind. And so warm, and she would just have a ball. The food is great. They make the best wine there. She likes wine. She's interested in studying wine, and actually, you should need to go.
Yeah, that would be a good trip for her, definitely. Mm-hmm. So, Dr. Carey, thank you very much for today's show. I enjoyed it a lot. Before we end off, where can people find you online? Do you have any social media handles and so forth?
Oh, I don't really. They're welcome to email me if they want to, or go to Facebook. They can find me on Facebook. My email is just my name. It's just Carey Walton, and then the letter or the number 777@gmail.com. So it's Carey Walton 777@gmail. You're welcome to email me if there's something I could do for you. But yeah, if you want to find me on Facebook, I'll befriend you. I don't put a lot on there, but I'm hoping to do more. And I was asking my daughter to help me with my social media presence because it's pretty pathetic. That's not something I'm very good at.
Oh, it's something we're all learning. Myself, I don't like doing the social media thing, but it's kind of a necessity.
Yeah, it is.
Especially ever since I started promoting the podcast. Before that, I think in high school I had social media. Then I deleted it for a few years, and then because I wanted to start a podcast, I had to create accounts again.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I enjoyed today's episode very, very much, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
Oh, thank you. This was fun. It's a great topic, and it's one of those things that Christians would do well to make beauty a bigger priority in their lives. Spend time looking for it and looking at it. I think of what Paul said in Philippians 4 about whatever is good and true and lovely and excellent. Think about those things, because I think he's recommending that what we take into our minds will make us better. If we put the right things in, it will make us better people. It will draw us closer to God. It matters what we put in our minds and what we put in front of our eyes. It matters a lot.
Yeah, it does. Thank you. I think that's a good place to end.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Carey.
Thank you.
And to our listeners, this is Hey Culture. Until next time, goodbye. Thank you for watching and or listening to Hey Culture, a podcast that wants to shine a light in the darkness. If you like this episode, please like, subscribe, share, and ring that notification bell. On Apple and Spotify, please review and rate this podcast. I'm René Fermor, and this is Hey Culture.